The dust rose in slow spirals across the hard, packed dirt of Medicine Bow, Wyoming territory, carried on a wind that smelled of sage and distant rain. It was the kind of afternoon that made a man squint against the glare, the sun hanging white and merciless in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The town itself wasn't much to speak of, just a collection of weathered buildings, clustered along a single main street like cattle huddled against a storm. But it was all Thomas Brennan had known for the past 3 years, ever since the fever took his wife and left him with a 6-year-old daughter and a grief so heavy he could barely stand upright under its weight. He sat now on the splintered steps of the general store, his hat pulled low, watching that dust dance, and trying not to think about what he was about to do. His hands trembled as he rolled a cigarette, the tobacco spilling across his calloused fingers. He'd worked every job he could find in this town. Swept floors, mucked stables, loaded freight wagons until his back screamed. But it was never enough. The winter had been hard, and spring brought no relief, only more empty pockets and the hollow ache of watching his little girl grow thinner by the day. Emma sat beside him, her small hand tucked into his, her feet dangling above the ground. She wore a dress that had once been blue but was now the color of old dishwater, patched at the elbows and hem. Her blonde hair, so like her mother's it made Thomas's chest tighten, hung in 2 braids down her back. She hummed softly to herself, some tune she'd made up, oblivious to the weight pressing down on her father's shoulders. Thomas had made his decision 3 days ago, though he'd been circling it like a wounded animal for weeks before that. The orphan train was coming through Cheyenne, just 2 days' ride south. He'd heard about it from the postmaster, who'd read it in a newspaper from back east. Children without families, being sent west to find new homes with good Christian folk who could provide for them. The words had wormed their way into his mind and wouldn't let go. Good Christian folk, provide for them, everything he couldn't be, everything he couldn't do. He looked down at Emma, at the smudge of dirt on her cheek, the way her eyes caught the light and held it like chips of amber. She was singing now something about a bird and a river, and he felt his heart crack clean down the middle. "Emmy," he said, his voice rougher than he intended, "I need you to do something for me." She looked up at him with those trusting eyes, and he almost couldn't go through with it. Almost. "I need you to sit under that big cottonwood tree at the edge of town. The one by the creek, you remember it. The one with the swing." Her face brightened. "That's the one. I need you to sit there and wait for me. Can you do that?" "How long?" "Just a while. I have to go do some business, important business, but I'll be back." The lie tasted like ashes in his mouth. She nodded solemnly, squeezing his hand. "I'm good at waiting, Papa." He knew she was. She'd waited for her mother to get better. Waited for him to find work. Waited for things to be like they were before. When there was enough food and a warm house and laughter that didn't sound forced and hollow. She'd waited with a patience that shamed him. They walked together to the cottonwood, his stride slow, hers skipping to keep up. The tree stood ancient and gnarled at the town's eastern edge, its branches spreading wide like protective arms. Someone had tied a rope to one of the lower limbs years ago, with a plank of wood for a seat, and it swayed now in the breeze. The creek burbled nearby, low from the dry spring but still running. Thomas knelt down in the dust, bringing himself level with his daughter. He wanted to memorize every detail of her face, the scatter of freckles across her nose, the slight gap between her front teeth, the way one eyebrow arched higher than the other when she was curious about something. "You sit right here," he said, guiding her to the base of the tree where the roots made natural seats, "and you wait. Don't go wandering off, you hear? Stay right here." "I will, Papa." She settled herself against the trunk, arranging her skirt over her knees like a little lady. "What if I get scared?" The question nearly undid him. "You won't. You're the bravest girl I know. Brave like your mama." He pulled a piece of hard candy from his pocket, one he'd been saving, and pressed it into her palm. Her face lit up like Christmas morning, and she popped it into her mouth immediately, her cheeks bulging. "I'll be back," he said again, though they both knew it for the lie it was. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the smell of her hair. Little girl sweat and dust and something sweet and indefinable that was just Emma. Then he stood and walked away before he could change his mind. He didn't look back. If he looked back, he'd never leave. His horse was waiting at the livery, already saddled. He'd paid the stableman the last of his money to have it ready. He mounted up and rode south, toward Cheyenne, toward the orphan train, toward the lie he'd told himself about a better life for his daughter. The lie that someone else could love her the way she deserved. That someone else could provide for her. That abandoning her under a tree was somehow an act of love and not the cowardice it truly was. The sun moved across the sky and Emma waited. She finished the candy slowly, making it last, rolling it around in her mouth until it was nothing but a sliver of sweetness on her tongue. She watched the creek, the way the water caught the light and threw it back in silver flashes. A blue jay landed on a branch above her head and scolded her for being too close to its nest. She told it she was sorry and promised not to bother it. The afternoon stretched long and golden, the shadows creeping across the ground like living things. Emma's stomach growled, but she ignored it. She was used to hunger. It was an old companion by now, familiar as her own shadow. She picked at the grass, braiding it into long chains, draping them around her neck like jewelry. She pretended she was a princess waiting for her father, the king, to return from battle. It was a good game, one that made the waiting easier. That's how Jack Thornton found her hours later, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. He'd been riding fence line for the Double T Ranch, checking for breaks after the spring storms, when he decided to cut through Medicine Bow on his way back to the bunkhouse. His horse was thirsty, and he knew the creek by the cottonwood ran clean and cold. He was a tall man weathered by wind and sun, with eyes the color of slate and hands that knew the weight of hard work. He'd been cowboying since he was 14, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. At 32, he figured that's just how his life would be. Some men were built for settling down, for wives and children and the kind of roots that went deep. He wasn't one of them, or so he'd always told himself. He saw her from a distance, a small figure in a faded dress sitting so still she might have been carved from stone. As he got closer, he realized she was a child alone, her back against the tree trunk, her hands folded in her lap. Something about the picture struck him as wrong. Children didn't sit that still, that quiet, unless something was badly amiss. He dismounted and led his horse to the creek, letting it drink while he approached the girl slowly, not wanting to spook her. Up close, he could see she was maybe 6 or 7, thin as a willow switch, with blonde braids and a face that was trying hard to be brave. "Even in miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "You lost." She shook her head. "No, sir. I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For my papa. He said he'd come back." Jack glanced around. The sun was getting lower, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. There was no one else in sight. "How long you been waiting?" She thought about it, her brow furrowing. Since the sun was up there, she pointed to a spot high overhead. She pointed west. Hours, then. Long enough that whoever had left her might not be coming back. Jack felt something cold settle in his gut. He'd seen plenty of hard things in his years, but a child abandoned was a special kind of cruelty. "What's your name?" he asked, squatting down so he was at her level. "Emma Brennan." "What's yours?" "Jack Thornton. Folks call me Jack." He studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the hollow quality to her cheeks. "You hungry?" "Emma." She hesitated, then nodded. Jack pulled a cloth bundle from his saddlebag, unwrapping it to reveal half a loaf of bread and a chunk of cheese. He broke off pieces and handed them to her. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned not to waste a single crumb. "Your papa say when he'd be back," he said soon. He had important business. Jack nodded, though his jaw tightened. He knew what this was. He'd seen it before, in the hard years after the war, when men broke under the weight of their failures and did things they'd never have thought themselves capable of. Leaving children by the roadside, dropping them at churches or orphanages in the dead of night, telling themselves it was for the best, that someone else would do better. "You got any other family?" "A mama, brothers or sisters. Mama's in heaven. She got sick. It's just me and papa. And where does your papa work? Where do you live?" "We got a room above the saddle shop. But papa says we might have to leave soon, 'cause we don't have money for rent." The picture was getting clearer, and Jack didn't like it one bit. He sat down in the dirt beside her, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his back against the tree trunk. His horse, content now, began to crop at the sparse grass nearby. "Tell me about your papa," he said. "What's he like?" Emma's face brightened. "He's the best papa. He tells me stories about when Mama was alive. He knows all the constellations. That's the stars." She added like she was sharing a great secret. "He can make a fire from nothing. And he sings sometimes, when he thinks I'm asleep. Sounds like a good man." He is, he's just sad a lot. Since Mama died, he's sad. Jack felt that cold thing in his gut twist tighter. A good man, brought low by grief and poverty. It was a story as old as the frontier itself. It didn't make what he'd done right, but it made it understandable. That was the worst part, maybe. That it made a kind of terrible sense. They sat together as the sun sank lower, the sky turning to flame and purple. Emma leaned against Jack's side, her small body radiating trust, and he felt something shift inside him. He'd spent years building walls around his heart, telling himself he didn't need anyone, didn't want the burden of caring. But this little girl, with her patient waiting and her fierce loyalty to a father who'd left her, was dismantling those walls brick by brick. Jack, her voice was small in the growing darkness. Yeah, do you think Papa's coming back? He could lie, it would be the kind thing maybe. But Jack had never been much for lying. I don't know, darlin'. I honest don't know. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, if he doesn't, what happens to me? We'll figure it out. I won't leave you here alone, that's for damn sure. Pardon my language. She giggled, a small sound that seemed impossibly bright in the dusk. Papa says that word sometimes when he thinks I can't hear. Jack smiled despite himself. Yeah, well, it ain't proper for little girls to repeat. I won't. Full dark came on fast the way it did in the high country. Stars began to prick the velvet sky, first a few, then hundreds, then thousands. Jack pointed them out to Emma, tracing the constellations with his finger, telling her their names and the stories behind them. She listened with rapt attention, her head tilted back, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Your papa teach you these. Some. But I like hearing you tell them. They slept there that night, Jack keeping watch while Emma curled up against him like a kitten, her head on his leg, his coat draped over her for warmth. He didn't sleep much, his mind turning over the problem like a man working a puzzle. Come morning, he'd have to make some decisions. He could take her into town, find the sheriff, let the law sort it out. She'd probably end up in an orphanage, if there was one nearby, or shipped off on one of those trains heading east. She'd find a family eventually, or she'd age out and make her own way. That was the way of things. Or he could keep her. The thought came unbidden and settled in his chest like a live coal. Keep her. Become the thing he'd never thought he could be, a father, a man with roots and responsibilities and reasons to stay in one place. It was insane. He was a drifter, a cowboy who owned nothing but his horse and saddle, who slept in bunkhouses and moved with the seasons. What did he know about raising a child? But then he looked down at her sleeping face, peaceful in a way that suggested she felt safe with him, and he knew with sudden, crystalline clarity that he couldn't abandon her. Not to the sheriff, not to an orphanage, not to fate. He'd make it work somehow. He'd find a way. Dawn came soft and pink, the light spreading across the land like spilled cream. Emma woke slowly, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes. Papa, she murmured, then remembered. Her face fell. He didn't come back. No, Jack said gently. He didn't. Is he dead? I don't think so. I think he had to go away. For a while. Will he come back ever? Jack chose his words carefully. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I do know. You can't stay here waiting. It's not safe and it's not right. So I got a proposition for you. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. What's a proposition? It's like an offer. I'm thinking you could come with me. Live at the ranch where I work. The boss, Mr. Thornton, he's a decent sort. His wife, too. They got a big house, and I bet they'd let you stay. You'd have a bed and regular meals and other kids to play with. The foreman's got 2 daughters about your age. But what if Papa comes back and I'm not here? Then we'll leave word in town. Everyone knows everyone here. If he comes back, he'll find you. Emma considered this, her young face serious. Would you be there? At the ranch? I would. I live in the bunkhouse with the other hands. And you'd teach me more constellations. Something in Jack's chest expanded, warm and painful. Every single one I know. Okay, she said, and just like that, his life changed. They rode into town together, Emma perched in front of Jack on his saddle, her small hands gripping the pommel. He took her to the restaurant and bought her a proper breakfast, eggs and bacon and flapjacks, dripping with syrup. She ate until her belly was round, her eyes wide with wonder at the abundance. Then he bought her a new dress, sturdy blue calico, and a pair of shoes that actually fit. He spent money he didn't really have, but he couldn't stand seeing her in those rags another minute. Before they left town, Jack stopped at the sheriff's office and told him the situation. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Coleman, shook his head sadly. Tom Brennan? Yeah, I know him. Good man once, before his wife died. Grief does funny things to folks. You sure you want to take this on, Jack? I'm sure. Ranch life ain't easy for a child. It ain't easy for anyone. But it's honest, and there's food, and she'll have people looking out for her. That's more than she's got now. Coleman nodded slowly. All right. I'll keep an eye out for Brennan if he comes back. You taking her to the Double T. That's the plan. Mr. Thornton's a fair man. He'll do right by you both. They rode out of Medicine Bow with the sun at their backs, heading north toward the ranch that sprawled across the valley like a small kingdom. Emma chattered as they rode, asking questions about everything: the mountains in the distance, the cattle they passed, the hawks circling overhead. Jack answered patiently, feeling something unfamiliar and good taking root inside him. The Double T was everything he'd promised and more. The main house stood white and proud, surrounded by cottonwoods and a garden that Mrs. Thornton tended with fierce pride. The bunkhouse, barns, and corrals spread out behind it, a well-ordered operation that ran like clockwork under the foreman's watchful eye. Samuel Thornton listened to Jack's story with sharp blue eyes, his wife Martha beside him, her hand on his arm. When Jack finished, there was a long silence. Then Martha spoke. The poor lamb. Of course she'll stay. We'll make up the spare room. She can help me in the garden, and Sarah and Beth will be glad for another playmate. I'll work extra, Jack said quickly. Take on more hours. Whatever it takes to cover her keep. Samuel waved a hand. We'll work something out. Ranch always needs good hands, and you're one of the best. As for the girl, well, everyone earns their place here, but I reckon a 6-year-old can start light, gathering eggs, helping with the washing. She'll grow into more. And just like that, Emma had a home. Not the home she'd been born to, maybe, but a home nonetheless. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost dreamlike in its normalcy. Emma thrived in the open air and abundance of the ranch. Color returned to her cheeks. She laughed often, playing with the foreman's daughters, helping Mrs. Thornton shell peas and collect eggs. She followed Jack around when she could, watching him work with the horses, listening to his stories around the bunkhouse fire. Jack, for his part, discovered that fatherhood, even the accidental kind, suited him better than he'd ever imagined. He liked teaching Emma things, showing her how to brush down a horse properly, how to find north by the stars, how to whistle through a blade of grass. He liked the way she ran to him when she got scared or hurt, trusting him to make it right. He liked, most of all, the sense of purpose it gave him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just drifting. He was building something. Summer came on hot and long, the grasslands turning gold, the cattle fat and lazy in the heat. Emma turned 7 under the big Montana sky, and they celebrated with cake and presents that Jack had saved for months to buy a doll with a china face and a book of fairy tales. She hugged him so tight he could barely breathe, whispering, "Thank you, Papa Jack," into his shirt, and he had to turn away so no one would see the tears in his eyes. It was in August, as summer started its slow fade toward autumn, that Thomas Brennan came back. Jack was working in the breaking corral when he saw the rider approaching, a lone figure on a tired horse. Something about the man's posture, the defeated slope of his shoulders, made Jack's gut tighten. He climbed out of the corral and waited, dust settling around him. The man dismounted slowly, like his bones hurt. He was thin to the point of gaunt, his clothes hanging off him, his face shadowed by a battered hat. When he looked up, Jack saw eyes haunted by demons he couldn't name. "I'm looking for Emma Brennan," the man said, his voice raw. "I was told she might be here." Jack's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You her father. I am name's Thomas Tom, Jack Thornton. I'm the one who found her, under that cottonwood tree where you left her." Thomas flinched like he'd been struck. "I know what I did. You don't gotta tell me." "I know. Do you?" Jack's voice was hard. "Do you know what it's like for a child to wait all day for someone who ain't coming? Do you know the kind of faith she had in you, sitting there telling herself you'd come back?" "Stop." Thomas's voice broke. "Please. I know I already know." They stood facing each other, 2 men connected by one small girl and the vastly different choices they'd made. Jack wanted to hit him, wanted to make him hurt the way Emma had hurt. But looking at Thomas now, he realized the man was already broken beyond any damage Jack could inflict. "Why'd you come back?" Jack asked finally. "Because I couldn't live with what I'd done. I got as far as Cheyenne, saw that orphan train, all those kids with their little bags heading off to strangers. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't put my Emma on that train. So I turned around, came back." Figured she'd be long gone in an orphanage somewhere or worse. But I had to know. Had to try? What are you wanting now? You planning to take her? Thomas's face crumpled. I don't know. I don't know what I got a right to want anymore. I just needed to see her. To know she's all right. She's more than all right. She's happy. She's fed and clothed and safe. She's got friends and people who care about her. She's got a future here. And I'm grateful for that. More grateful than I can say. You saved her life, Mr. Thornton. I know that. So what happens now? Before Thomas could answer, a voice piped up behind them. Papa. They both turned. Emma stood on the porch of the main house, a basket of laundry in her arms, her face frozen in an expression of pure shock. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the basket fell, clothes tumbling into the dirt, and Emma was running. Jack's heart seized, certain she was running to Thomas, that all these months would dissolve in an instant, and she'd choose her blood father over the man who'd taken her in. But Emma ran to him, throwing herself against his legs, wrapping her arms around him tight. Papa Jack, she said, her voice muffled against his pants like, that's him. That's my old papa, old papa. The words hit Thomas like bullets, and he swayed on his feet. Jack felt Emma trembling and put a hand on her head, steadying her. It's all right, Emmy. He ain't gonna hurt you. I know. I'm not scared of him. I'm just... She trailed off, not having words for the confusion of emotions warring inside her small chest. Thomas took a step forward, then stopped, like he was approaching a wild animal. Baby girl, I'm so sorry. So sorry. She peeked out from behind Jack's legs, regarding her father with solemn eyes. I know. You said you would, but you didn't. I know. It was wrong. The wrongest thing I ever done. I waited a long time. I know you did. Jack watched this exchange, feeling like his heart was being torn in two. He wanted to protect Emma from more hurt, but he also understood, on some level he couldn't quite name, that she needed this. Needed to confront the man who'd abandoned her. Needed to say her piece. Mrs. Thornton appeared on the porch, alerted by the commotion. She took in the scene with quick, intelligent eyes and made a decision. Emma, honey, why don't you come help me with the laundry? Let the men talk. Emma looked up at Jack questioningly. He nodded. Go on. I'll be right here. She went reluctantly, looking back over her shoulder until Mrs. Thornton gently guided her inside. Thomas watched her go, his face a mask of grief. She's beautiful, he said hoarsely. Yes, she does. And she's happy here. I can see that. She is. Thomas nodded slowly. That's all I wanted. All I wanted was for her to be safe and cared for. I thought leaving her was the answer. Thought someone better than me would find her and give her a life I never could. And someone did, you did. So I guess I got what I wanted, even if I went about it all wrong. What are you going to do? Jack asked. I don't know. I got no money, no prospects. I'm barely holding myself together most days. But I can't just walk away again. Can I? Jack thought about this. Thought about Emma, about the life she'd built here, about the way she called him Papa Jack with no hesitation. Thought about Thomas, broken and repentant, but still her father by blood. There were no easy answers here, no clear right path. She needs stability, Jack said finally. She needs to know the ground under her feet ain't gonna disappear. Can you give her that? I don't know. Then here's what I'm thinking. You want to be part of her life, you do it right. You get yourself sorted. Find work, find a place. Prove you can stand on your own 2 feet. We keep her here where she's safe and you visit. Regular, show her you mean it this time. And maybe, eventually, if you get to a place where you can provide for her proper, we talk about what comes next. Thomas stared at him. You'd do that? You'd let me see her. I ain't her keeper. I'm just the man who happened to find her when she needed finding. But yeah, I'd do that. For her sake. Every kid deserves a father who shows up, even if it's late. Something like hope flickered in Thomas's eyes, fragile as candlelight. I'll work hard. I'll prove it. I swear. Don't swear to me. Swear to her. The sun was setting now, painting the world in shades of amber and shadow. Samuel Thornton came out of the barn, and after a quick conversation with Jack, offered Thomas work in a spot in the bunkhouse. It was charity, maybe, but the kind that gave a man a chance to earn back his dignity. Thomas accepted with shaking hands and tears in his eyes. That evening they all sat together on the porch, Emma between Jack and Thomas, uncertain but willing. Thomas told her stories about her mother, gentle stories full of love and laughter. Emma listened, soaking in these pieces of a past she barely remembered. When it was time for bed, she hugged Thomas carefully like he was made of glass. Will you be here tomorrow? She asked. I will. And the day after that, and the day after that. You promise. He knelt down, looking her in the eye. I promise. And this time, I mean it, this time, I'll prove it. The months that followed were hard in their own way, full of awkward conversations and tentative rebuilding. Thomas worked himself ragged on the ranch, determined to show Emma, and everyone else, that he meant to do right. He stayed sober, saved his money, and visited Emma every evening after work, sometimes just sitting with her while she did her lessons or played with her doll. Slowly, painfully, trust began to rebuild. Emma started calling him Papa Tom, to distinguish him from Papa Jack, and the two men came to a kind of peace, united in their love for the little girl who'd changed both their lives. They would never be friends, exactly, but they developed a mutual respect born of shared sacrifice. Jack, for his part, discovered that being a father didn't mean you had to be alone. Sarah Thornton, the foreman's daughter, had grown into a fine young woman with a quick smile and kind heart. She'd been sweet on Jack for years, though he'd been too blind to notice. But watching him with Emma, seeing the gentleness he was capable of, opened her eyes wider, and his along with them. They courted slowly, properly, and were married the following spring in a ceremony that had Emma as the flower girl, beaming in a dress white as snow. The house they built at the edge of the ranch property had 3 bedrooms, one for Jack and Sarah, one for Emma, and one for the future children they hoped to have. Thomas, who'd saved enough money by then to afford his own place in town, visited every Sunday, bringing candy and stories and the kind of patient, steady love that can only come from someone who knows what it means to lose everything. Emma grew up strong and happy, caught between 2 fathers who loved her in different ways but equally fierce. She learned to rope and ride from Jack, learned to carve wood and identify birds from Thomas. She learned, most importantly, that love wasn't about blood or obligation, but about showing up, about choosing every single day to be there. Years later, when Emma was grown with children of her own, she would tell them the story of the cottonwood tree. She'd tell them about waiting, about faith, about the cowboy who'd asked her a simple question that changed everything. She'd tell them that family wasn't always the people you were born to, but sometimes the people who found you when you needed finding most. And she'd tell them that forgiveness was possible, even for the hardest things, if you were willing to do the work. But on that August evening, with the stars coming out one by one and the sound of laughter drifting from the bunkhouse, Emma was just a little girl sitting between 2 men who'd both, in their own ways, saved her. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.